Howdy, folks. Happy Friday. Thank God it's Friday. It's sunny in Buffalo. Huzzah us. Huzzah.
I'm not sure what that means, but okay.
It means wunderbar.
Hooray.
Okay.
Hooray.
Hooray.
Yeah.
I think it's just hooray. So
Okay. Let's talk about I'm not going to necessarily rip Aaron Boone, but the thought of what he was talking about after yesterday's game, where he was like, Aaron Judge's ball that he hit out in the outfield, there was a little bit of a crosswind, suggesting that if the roof was closed, just Mike, you got to hold on here.
You didn't hear the
hold on.
Okay, hold on, and then I'll destroy you.
And basically intimating if the roof is closed, it's probably a home run. But the one thing I want to get across to all the managers in Major League Baseball and even baseball fans, all these ballparks are home run friendly now. There's very few pitchers parks left. If you go look at the dimensions of these ballparks compared to what they were in the 80s and 90s, it's a joke. So I don't want to hear any complaining about it. It doesn't matter if it was Aaron Boone or anybody else.
Well, okay, because I heard it live.
I heard it too.
Wait. Will you let me finish? The question was, Aaron, did you think that ball was out? And afterward, somebody said, well, the only ballpark that ball would have been out in was Yankee Stadium. So it was part of the question. He wasn't pissing and moaning because they opened the roof.
And why did he bring up the crosswind, Mike?
Because there was one. What is he supposed to do?
That's such a joke.
The freaking umpire's pant legs were flapping, for Christ's sake.
Oh, my God.
What are you talking about?
So he's going to complain that's why Aaron Judge...
He wasn't complaining, Russ.
No, he was saying... Yeah, that wasn't a complaint, Mike.
He was saying it was a factor in the ball getting knocked down by the wind.
I watched that game live. I not one for 1 second thought the ball was knocked down, and the ball wasn't even going to go over the fence, but the outfielder made a really good play on it. That ball wasn't even going to be a home run.
It might have been a double. All I know is, Kev, watching, and I'll rely on Anthony to give a analysis of the Padres-Phillies series because, frankly, I've only watched a couple minutes of it. If you watch that Astros-Yankee series, if you think that the mental aspect of facing an Astros team who the Yankees organization hates with the heat of 1,000 suns, if you don't think that is not in their heads, I mean, I've never seen a team more sort of psyched out. They struck out 30 times, and they've almost lost these games mentally before they've lost it on the scoreboard.
Yeah, I mean, there might be something to that, although, the Astros are a pretty good team. So
yes,
and their pitching is pretty good. So, but that's probably a bigger factor. But, I'm sure there is some mental aspect of it. But, I didn't see what happened with the Aaron Boone situation, so I don't know too much about that. But, I kind of thought the Astros are going to win this series. So
yeah, so did I. I predicted that they were going to win, but I just hope that the Yankees make a better showing than losing 4 straight like Seattle lost in 3 straight. And right now they're down 2-0. They've lost 2 close games. They've struck out, like I said, 30 times in 2 games, which is it's inexcusable. It's completely what the Yankees weren't doing in the first half of the season. But now, because of injuries, because of their bullpen, because of the lineup being.
You have to acknowledge that the Astros have the best pitching staff in the playoffs right now.
Yeah, but I mean, Verlander's a Hall of Famer. I just don't get being stymied by Framber Valdez. I mean, he's not a top starter.
I think he's a good. I think he's a pretty good pitcher, Mike. I think Valdez is a good pitcher.
Yeah, I would.
I think you're underrating him a lot.
But Anthony, what's the point of view on the Padres Phillies right now?
Padres Phillies has been pretty much. I mean, game 1 was it went from a masterful performance from the Phillies pitching staff in game 1 to one where the wheels completely came off in game 2. Aaron Nola, even from the start of that game, even though he had good velocity in game 2. But I would also say there was a bit of an effect too, and I think we all understood, and this was mentioned in game 1. At game 2, the offense, that you had more likely going to see offense really jump off at a 1:00 start in San Diego versus nighttime. That being said, Nola definitely wasn't hitting his spots as he was earlier in the playoffs. And, the Phillies were able to get him spotted to a 4-0 lead. With some fortune, listen, it was definitely fortunate, I would say, in game 2 that they got out to that lead. But I would also state that at the end of the day, the Padres have an excellent offense, and they got to they got to Nola, and then they got to Hand, and basically blew that second game open. So it's a toss-up, I think, coming into game 3. And again, I think the Padres have the advantage, obviously, with Musgrove going to the hill. But we'll also see whether or not Ranger Suarez, after having a very lackluster, I thought, first game of the Atlanta series, if now that he's got his first postseason start under his belt, he can, at home, give the Phillies a better performance. But right now, I would say momentum swinging a little bit towards the Padres, but I would say game 3, if the Phillies get up early on this one, that makes this, that they'll be able to they can snatch momentum back.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I do want to mention that sound was the sound of my wife finding her earbuds that she lost for a week. So that was
somebody's going to come out of this show happy today. That's good.
That was triumphant.
You're sure as hell not getting that out of me. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, October 21st, 2022.
I'm Anthony Mangione.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz.
And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. All right, let's start with this because Yuri Slafkovsky, the first overall pick in the 2022 draft, scored his first NHL goal last night. But the chatter regarding him and regarding Shane Wright, who a lot of people thought should have been picked number 1, are more in regards to their immediate NHL future. I know that Pierre LeBrun mentioned a couple days ago that the plan of the Canadiens is to send Slafkovsky down to Laval of the AHL to get more playing time, to play 20 minutes a night, play in the power play, et cetera, et cetera. And the approach of Seattle, specifically Dave Hackstall, in regards to Shane Wright, I think he's played 3 games and he's averaging a little under 7 minutes a night. So there's talk about him going back to the Ontario Hockey League, and he can't go to the AHL because he's only 18 years old. Well, both situations, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, look, with Montreal, I think they're handling Slafkovsky correctly because they're giving him a good amount of ice time, seeing what he has, letting him get his NHL experience, and then I do believe he should go down to Laval. Now, because of the Wright situation, I don't understand why Dave Hackstall is only playing him 6 minutes. It's like, listen, if there's a plan, then form a plan. If you want to play him for 5 games and then send him back, then give him at least 10 minutes of ice time. My God, it just doesn't make sense. He's got 1.2, the same as Slafkovsky, but he's barely played. And so if he is that out of place, then just do that, what I said, and then send him back. But you're not doing him any favors by playing him 6 minutes at a time. I understand the scratching of him so he could see things from the press box. That's fine. Coaches do that. But otherwise, it's not like Seattle has anything to lose here by playing Shane Wright.
Kev, I mean, I look at the situation and it's like, if you're only going to play him 6 minutes a night, I just think I don't think it's ruining him, but I do think it's really detrimental to his progress. So if you're not going to play him, then send him back to junior.
Yeah, I don't get it either. You should bring him up, and Russ hit the nail right on the head. This is not a season for the Kraken to. They're not going for anything. They're just advancing the ball a little bit because it's going to be a while. So why not play him 10 or 12 minutes? What does it really matter?
Right.
And let's see how ready he is. I haven't seen either game, so I don't know. Is he really overmatched? I mean. If that's the argument, then why not just do it now and send him down? He wouldn't be the first guy.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would agree with Kevin in that regards. Like if they look at him and it's just maybe a little too much too soon, possibly. Then, but again, then if you think that, you send him back to the OHL. You let him continue to get his ice time. And again, it's unfortunate that they can't send him to Coachella Valley and be able to play in the AHL. It's one of those situations where you would like to see that happen if the rule was different. But in the end, if he is overmatched, which I haven't necessarily heard anything along those lines, but we also know Dave Haxtell isn't always necessarily keen on playing, young players. I think they look at it, it's still early in the season. They think they may have a chance to be competitive this year. They've made some moves this offseason, but at the same time, realistically, they're still very much a work in progress.
I mean,
I would say, if you're not going to play right, put them down. I would say, if you're not going to play right, send them down to the OHL.
Yeah, I could just say I wrote an article. It was on my website until we did a remodel where Barry Melrose played Stamkos a series of games as a rookie, 6 minutes at a time, and I flipped out in an article because I'm like, listen, this kid is an elite talent. What are you doing? And at that time, Melrose was getting a kick out of his 40-year-old plus line that he had, and that was his focus. So coaches could lose focus of that, and sometimes, like Anthony said, just don't want to deal with it.
I remember back to that situation, Kevin. Melrose was, I'm teaching the kid a lesson. Well, the way you teach a kid a lesson is you play them, and if they make mistakes, you tell them what not to do and what to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've talked about this before, but that led to, I thought, the best approach ever with a young player, and that was Rick Tocchet. Playing them 2 or 3 games, setting them out for a game, making them watch from up top, and then talk about what he saw. Getting him in the weight room, then a couple of days a week. I remember Stamkos telling me he gained 10 or 12 pounds of pure muscle, that year. And that just doesn't happen usually because they're just, playing all the time. They don't get into the weight room much. And, that was the way to do it. It was like an apprenticeship program. The one caution about Wright, and I know Russ knows more about this than I do, but, there was a thought last year that, Wright felt like he had nothing to prove even last year in the OHL. So what's it going to be like, this season when he goes back?
There's going to be that. I mean, there is that concern. I do want to mention Stamkos is almost 1,000 points in his career now. So clearly Tocchet did the right thing. Right. But there is the concern of that, Kev. I mean, again, I can go back to when I went and watched an Oshawa Generals game and saw John Tavares, and this was probably like maybe year 3 of him into it. And he was completely bored. He just was. Yeah. And and I get it.
But this
the best possible scenario might have been for him to take a Matthews deal, like, and not sign him now, let him go to Switzerland and play, right, like one season there or in the Swiss league, something where it's not the OHL, but he's clearly I haven't seen him. I shouldn't say that, but it appears that he's not ready for the NHL. So if that's the case, and he can't go to the AHL, and not Europe isn't right for everyone, but I think it would be right for him. Like, I think that his game would translate well over there.
I'd like him to have a chance to prove he's not ready for the NHL. That's where I'm at.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I would prefer that too. I'm with you on that.
Anthony, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I would concur in regards to that. Like, this is just where you're kind of caught in no man's land with a high-level talent. That's really where we're at right now, where you really would prefer to see him, playing maybe again, but it's just not an option for him to play in the A. So Europe, I would say, that's something that you should possibly look into that, because he did, have a pretty good year last year, right, coming in, and the previous year, obviously, he struggled, but I would want to see him again, not sort of feel like he's twiddling his thumbs. And then the problem is always you worry about, like we talked about with Morgan Frost, where you get it sometimes into bad habits in an additional year and you aren't pushing yourself necessarily as hard. You're kind of not quite coasting, but you get into bad habits and you got to break them when you get into the NHL.
Well,
and that's the one thing that would concern me for him going back to junior.
I mean, he's not a minus player right now. His face-off percentage is low for sure. Some of his advanced stats are decent for the 6.5 minutes he's getting.
Well, the interesting thing here is obviously, he gets to 9 games. If they're resting, if they're sitting him like healthy, scratching him, 2-3 games, then playing him 1, they could stretch this out to the middle of November. I mean, yeah. Russ, could they be thinking of keeping him up with the team until it gets time for World Junior time?
They could. Teams have done that.
And then send him to play for Team Canada. And then when he comes back in January, then you make a decision of whether he goes back to June. I mean, I don't
happen that way. Yeah.
I mean, you're burning. The last thing they want to do is burn a year of entry level. But obviously, I think the more what I've learned is that is not the big concern. It's always the 40 game mark where they burn a year towards unrestricted free agency.
The one thing I want to point out about Wright, if he wants to go into the OHL and score 150 points, he will, because he basically last year played on a not a very talented team and made everybody around him better. Like that was his goal, was to get everybody around him better, make his line mates better so he can make the playoffs and have a good year. If he goes back there now, he's just going to probably try and crush records, which he could. I mean, he's totally capable of it.
Now, the interesting thing about the Canadians and Slavkovsky, if anybody watched even the highlights of the game last night against Arizona, and just to illustrate how disappointing the Leaf performance against Arizona was on Monday, Montreal kicked the Arizona Coyotes' butts 6-2. Slavkovsky got run at by Josh Brown, former Senator defenseman, and Arbor Jacki, the rookie for the Habs, went after him, also got into a fight with Zach Kassian. But later in the play, Slavkovsky scores his first NHL goal, and everybody's seen the viral video of him sort of like just getting sort of like telling Brown to F off and sort of getting in his face. I saw that sort of out of context, Kevin. Then I saw it was in response to the hit. They still are talking about it's only one goal, it's only one game, but they are talking about sending him to the AHL, and they have that option with him because he's a European prospect who started in the NHL. That as long as a player has CHL eligibility, he has to go back to junior. But it's tough to determine what the best course of action there for a kid who's big and talented, but maybe not ready for what the big show is.
Yeah, but the situation for Montreal is much better because they have that AHL option.
Right.
And, there's been a lot of discussion about Edvinsson in Detroit. They sent him down to the American League. And Eisenman's point is, it's not just the number of minutes, but it's how he's going to play those minutes. Like he wanted to make sure that Edvinsson had penalty killing, power play, and 5-on-5 and log a lot of minutes. He couldn't assure that in Detroit. So he said, send him to the AHL. Well, I think that will be true of Slavkovsky. You can send him to the AHL where you can give him those kind of minutes. You can give him the power play time. But, Montreal, you got to factor this in too. Montreal's off to a pretty good start. Mm-hmm. And, you don't want to put a guy in there who, can't help them, move along with that. So, I think Montreal has got to feel better about their options because they could send them down and tell them, look, at Christmas time, we may bring you back if you play well and all that kind of stuff. So,
Kev, I think what Montreal can do is what the Tampa did with Stamkos, because I think Slavkovsky can be in better shape. I don't think he's really had a chance to train like an NHLer for a full season. So I think if you go to Laval, which clearly it's a new place and the Canadians have put a lot of money into it, they could really streamline him, like you said, and he could always come back.
Yeah, and he's not going to be playing every game in Laval either. He might have time like Stamkos did to work out, to build muscle mass, and to come back.
Just regular schedule, yeah.
So, sorry. Looking at some of the games last night, and I look at this one specifically because one team, their fan base is not too happy, and that's the Vancouver Canucks, who have now lost the first 5 games. They lost in overtime to the Minnesota Wild 4-3. The Wild get their first win of the season. Kev, it's too. I mean, there have been very few instances. The Denny Savard firing in Chicago when they hired Joel Quenneville. I think it was 2 or 3 games into the season. Usually, a coach does not get fired 4 or 5 games into the season. But the talk regarding Vancouver. Now, Bruce Boudreau was hired by the owner. He was hired before Alvin and I think Rutherford were brought in. So he's not their coach, but they said, okay, we're going to stick with him. He has a year left in his contract. But they have a lot of things riding on this season, and they're 0-3-2. I mean, how long of a leash do you think he has?
Yeah, and the amazing part of what's happened to them is like they've had leads late in the third period and they haven't been able to hold them. That's always alarming. When you have collapses of that level, and they were playing a team that was also struggling and they lost to them. Last night. Although I thought it was kind of interesting that Marc-Andre Fleury improved his goals against average from 8.37 to 5.96 because of that effort last night. So, I think it's way too early to fire them. Like, let's see where they are. The problem though is, I say this all the time: you can't win the cup in the first 3 weeks, but you sure heck can lose it.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to get to the point where you're suddenly 2-9-3 or something in your start, because that's too big of a hole especially in that division. So it's tough, but I don't feel like this is Boudreaux's fault. It's not like they're
No, I don't
tuning
feel
him
like
up.
it's his fault either. But let me ask you this, Kev. I mean, again, we all felt like they had playoff talent, whether they would just miss or maybe we were all like in the mix about that. But if they go down the same path they went last year, and I'm okay with Boudreaux doing this, will the Vancouver Canucks actually rebuild? Will the owners actually look at this and say, okay, we can't keep fixing the same flat tire. It's going to eventually go flat again.
Not a chance in hell.
Yeah, they're too committed now to a lot of players. I don't think they can do that.
Yeah, see, that's going to hurt them then.
Now, the one thing, sorry, Kev, the one thing that, and let me get your opinion on this. The one thing that has been pointed out is they signed Besser to the extension. They signed JT Miller to the extension, but neither one have no trade clauses this year. Oh, Anthony's gone. Neither one of them have no trade clauses this year. So if they bail out, if they think that all of a sudden this is not working and we have to do a paradigm shift, and God knows Jim Rutherford is never hesitant to make those kind of changes, then they have the freedom and ability to do that, Kev. But I just look at Vancouver and I see a team. They have a ton of talent up front. They have a really great young goaltender. But the defense is something that I think is a big issue, yeah. And I don't know, and obviously early in the season that is reflected in the fact that they're blowing leads.
Yeah, I'm not so sure though that the trading away those players is it's a complicated option. Like teams were interested in paying those guys that amount of money, but not and then give up assets to go with that. They were thinking about, if he was free, we could go after him. So I don't know how easy it would be to move that kind of player, but I guess it's certainly possible because those are important players. But I just don't see them going into a rebuilding when they have a lot of talent there. Like they got a goalie ranked in the top 10. They've got 4 or 5 or 6 premium blue chip players. Mm-hmm. They just got to, as you said, improve the defense. Their defense isn't nearly good enough. No. And I don't know that their bottom 6 is strong enough either. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do.
Anthony, the one thing I've learned over the many years is that if ownership doesn't want to rebuild, you're not rebuilding. And Aquilini has never wanted to rebuild. And they never have. And in Philadelphia, I don't think the ownership in Philly wants to rebuild. If it happens,
they mirror one another. I was going to say they mirror one another in a lot of ways. The only difference is that I think Vancouver has levels of top end talent that Philadelphia does not have.
Right.
Game breaking talent, which I think for an owner like Aquilini, again, as Kevin pointed to, when you have those chips in there, you're not going to go into I just don't see anybody going into a rebuild. You're going to try to find whatever if you can find advantages around the edges, that's what you're trying to do here to try to build around what you have.
Yeah. But, and in Toronto, all those years where they, the fan base would please finish in the bottom 5. You get a chance at winning the lottery and drafting Stamkos or Tavares. The Ontario Teachers Pension Fund owned the team, and they wanted the guaranteed gates throughout the year and sneak into the playoffs and get a couple gates, and it guaranteed their profit. And only when TSN, when Bell Media and Rogers bought them and gave the thumbs up to Brendan Shanahan to essentially tank for 2 years, did they finally do it. But before that, there was no buy-in with ownership to do it. So, I don't think Vancouver's ever going to do it.
Don't you think that the talent level of Vancouver is higher than Toronto's at that point, though?
Much higher.
It is.
Yeah,
Much
yeah. I mean, I think that's apples and oranges. I think there's just way too many quality players on this team to even consider that.
Right, but what happened last year with them, Kev, is they dug themselves a hole. They fired Travis Green. They brought in Bruce Boudreau. They had a really good second half. They almost climbed back into the playoff race. I think the assumption here was that they were going to start where they left off last year, and right now it's not happening. Maybe you make a trade. Knowing Jim Rutherford, if there's a trade out there, he'll make that trade before he fires a coach.
I mean, look, they just scratched Connor Garland. So, like, some of these signings and trades that they've done have been abysmal. The OEL is one that we pointed out a while ago. That one's under the bridge. But even Connor Garland was like, I think one person on this panel thought that was a great trade, and they signed him for a lot of money.
Yeah, but the bottom line is we're only 5 games in, and if they had won one
before we change that narrative, Kev, 0-8, like what would be?
But let me just make my point though. If they would win one of those games, and they were 1-2-2, I don't even think we'd be having that conversation.
Okay.
I just think right now it's the kind of perception of, and it's the way it's happened and everything else. I don't think it's kind of the end of the world. Now, yeah, I mean, Russ's point is well taken. I don't know where that is. I think it's a feel. You got to kind of just watch that team and see where it is. I mean, because, like I said, you can't let it go too far because you really could dig such a hole that you couldn't possibly get out. So, I mean, you got to start winning.
I mean, the weird thing is Vancouver has, like you said, they're 0-3-2, but they have 2 points. San Jose's played one more point. They beat the Rangers yesterday. They have 2 points too. And it's like, so if they can't separate themselves in like a week or two from those bottom teams, I think that's when you have to worry.
But is this symptomatic of a Canadian market? Because we know the Leafs were 2-2, and there was talk about, Sheldon Keefe was leading the odds to be fired, and then he says something about the elite players not playing, and now all of a sudden is he losing the room and everything, and now they win in overtime yesterday, Kevin, and everything's beautiful. I mean, they were 2-4-1 last year at the beginning of the year. They barely beat the worst team in the league, which was Chicago. And then they went on this ridiculous run from the middle late October to December 1st when they won almost everything. That's the way the league is now, really. Teams can get hot, teams can get cold. And then when it happens at the beginning of the year, it's under a bigger microscope.
Yeah, no, you're right. But again, you just talked about their record. Was there talk of panic then when they were 2-4-1? Yeah.
Yes, there was talk. There was chatter about Keefe being fired, even though and Dubas getting fired, even though they had just extended Keefe in the summer.
Well, I would say this. I think if it continues another 10 days, I think Boudreau is vulnerable. There's no doubt. But I don't think there's any discussion, or would be even then, that if this doesn't work, we're going to have to blow this up. I don't think there's any blowing this up. So,
right. Sorry, Kev. The one thing I saw in that Leafs game that Mike sort of agreed with is that they're playing tight. And if you look at them right now, they have a 0 differential, and so they've got to break out of that in order to really convince people that they're going to have a better season. If they sort of hover around that, but they can make the playoffs simply because it's the regular season of the NHL, there's going to be a lot of doubters out there.
Well, they're playing tight right now because they have a goaltender that they don't really know very well in Samsonov, who's 3-0, and he's played well, but he hasn't been really asked to make any like 10-bell saves. And their star players. I mean, Matthews assisted on the Robertson goal yesterday, but he was really stymied and focused on by Dallas. He's not scoring like he did last year. He's early in the year he didn't score, and then all of a sudden he busted out. Marner, same thing. Their leading goal scorer is Nylander. So really, their offense isn't on line. Their best the power play, which was first in the league last year, went 1 for 8 against Dallas. So I think Russ, until their offense sort of gets online, they're going to play close to the vest because they don't want to lose points like they lost them on Monday.
Okay.
I want to talk about because the Buffalo Sabres beat Calgary, handed Calgary their first loss yesterday, and I've really been optimistic and high on the Sabres, which is uncharacteristic for me because, in Buffalo, I was never a big Sabre fan, but I do like the direction of this organization, Russ. And if you look, Rasmus Dahlin's now got 4 goals in 4 games. Owen Power looks like he's going to be a really good player. And when you have like the twin towers on the blue line, and you've got Samuelson and you've got Yoki Haru. I mean, if they don't have the goalie yet, but they have the defense and they have some good young forwards.
Yeah, and actually remind yourself. Let's talk about the Islanders. I watched a lot of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't believe they were using Peyton Krebs as like a 4th line center. I don't think they're that stacked where that should happen because I don't think he could be that. I saw in practices they had him there. I don't know if he played in the game there, but they do have a lot more talent. We talked about how Samuelson helps Dahlin. Dahlin's the first goal defenseman to ever score 4 goals in his first 4 games of the season. Like that's an NHL record now. So this is, going to be a breakout year for Dahlin. There's no question about it. I also think this is the first time in a long time or ever that he has really felt completely comfortable with his whole surroundings and everything that's going on. And now we're going to really see that talent. And by the way, they got Owen Power too.
And I think it's also evident as well. I mean, we saw he's been pretty vocal in games. He's going at it with the other teams. And I think, you see I never say he was never not having full engagement, but he's kind of a bit more of a leadership role now that he's maybe more comfortable and willing to sort of kind of step out a little bit more. And I think his team, with his young teammates, they follow that. I think that's a really important thing. It's early, don't get me wrong, but I think it's a promising development to see Dahlin being, active, vocal, and basically, backing up his teammates in moments like that when, other teams might think that the Sabres are the same old Sabres.
Well, Kev, all I can say is this: the way that Dahlin has blossomed under Don Granato just shows you how bad of a fit Ralph Kruger was for this organization.
Yeah, no, there's no question about that. And I think it's not so much what he's taught him about playing defense. It's just the empowering of the player. I think it's, making him feel comfortable, making him feel confident, making him not play in fear of what's going to happen if he makes a mistake. It's all of that. And I do think the arrival of Owen Power also has opened up things for him because you got to be aware now and the development of Samuelson. They actually have the defense that the Canucks need. If the Canucks had, defensemen like that. And the other thing about Dahlin that I would point out, and it feels like he's been around a long time because he moved instantly into the league. But I looked this morning to be sure of it, and I thought, is he like 22 or is he 23 or 24? He's 22. So, he's still young and he's doing it. And, the four goals in 4 games to start the season, like that's really remarkable. I mean, Bobby Orr didn't do that. Nick Lidstrom, Doug Harvey, Ray Bourque, some of the great goal scoring defensemen, Coffey, Hatcher, nobody did that, just him at age 22. So I think that's an impressive mark. I think he's playing with a lot of confidence. I think the team itself is better as well, which I think, also adds to his confidence level. And Kevin Adams has done a good job. You've got to say he's done a good job of bringing in. And actually, I agree that they don't have the goalie, but Comrie's played very well in back-to-back games.
Yes.
40 plus saves in each of those games.
Right.
And he looks really, really good. So, he might be a very good stopgap measure until they figure out, what it's going to be. But yeah, I'm with Mike. I'm very bullish on the Sabres. I like their direction. I like their coach. I obviously think he's one of the better coaches, and I think Adams does a pretty good job of finding parts for him. So
now, Russ, the Islanders, who are now 2-2 on the season, they lose the Devils 4-1. And I have to say, they did score a bunch of goals, I think, in their previous game, but only one goal against Mackenzie Blackwood and the Devils. And did you watch that game?
Yeah. I mean, the way we looked at it the other day is they scored a lot of goals in 2 games against like 2 not so great teams. The Devils went in there and just dominated at UBS. Like, the Islanders only had 17 shots on goal, like 17. And the Devils were just out skating them. And this is a little bit of a worry. It's easy to just say, well, yeah, the Islanders are built for the playoffs and everything. And the answer that we always come up with is you got to make it to the playoffs. Mm-hmm. By making it to the playoffs, you have to have a certain amount of team speed, and they've got some older players there. And so, again, I do kind of worry about that. Matt Martin got almost 11 minutes of ice time. I mean, Clutterbuck, 11 minutes of ice time. It may be a help that they had 39 hits, but it didn't help them. And they had more giveaways. But I was watching it, and Hughes had a great game.
Hits I mean, at the end of the day, Russ, I'm so over hits.
I know.
I'm so over hits.
It's a bogus stat. It's home cooking stat too.
I mean, you're chasing the play. You're chasing the play.
Just ask Bobby Clark and Dan McGillis. But I noticed this, Russ. It's like, okay, for this team who has very few young players, Zach Parise plays almost 15 minutes, and Oliver Wahlstrom plays 13. That should at least be reversed.
It should. I mean, Heischer and Bratt just killed the Islanders. They killed them. And those are 2 of the faster guys in the Metro, like they just are. And that's something where, like, if I'm the coach, I've got to start thinking about, I might need to infuse a little bit more youth into this lineup because I need to get a little better skating. There's going to be a time where if you want to play these veterans, fine. But, early in the season when everybody comes out of the gate and they're looking to, do their best and skate their best, I don't know. They're not up to it right now. There's those couple of games they had a big offensive output, and then you have this one where there was just nothing.
No.
Well, after the game too, Lane Lambert, the coach, really sort of pulled a page out of Sheldon Keith's manual and really criticized his players for lack of effort. I'm not sure he used that exact phrasing, but that's what he was saying. And I thought that was true. I thought that they really didn't seem to have anything out there. And, it wasn't like they were playing the Colorado Avalanche.
Right.
I mean, I get that the Devils, have some young talent, but, this is a non-accomplished team, and they came out, they being the Islanders, and laid an egg. And, I think that's worrisome. I like this team still. I think, Dobson is a good player on the rise. I think he's played well in the early going here. I love their goaltending. But if you can't, muster a good effort in game, what are they at? 5, 6? What are they at now?
4. 2-2.
4. 2-2. Okay. If you can't muster a good effort in game 4, there's something wrong. There's something really wrong.
Especially against the team that's supposedly one of your rivals. It's, one of the 3 in the New Jersey area. It's somebody that you should get up for. And, I mean, it's not okay. It's not like Toronto playing Arizona where they play Arizona twice a year and you can go to sleep because they stink. this is a team you face 4 times a year, and you're battling for a playoff spot, and you shouldn't have a low pulse against. And if they do, I think that's a statement against, what is going on with that team. So, yeah. Couple surprises. I just want to touch on these before we end the show. I think we expected Vegas to be a little better than they were at the end of the year last year, but Jack Eichel, 2 goals. He's now got 3. Aiden Hill, there seem to be splitting their work between Hill and Thompson. Doesn't seem to be it seems to be a rotation and not a 1A, 1B type of thing. But they're 4-1, Kev. And I mean, I think it was imperative for that team to get off to a good start. And Bruce Cassidy, maybe the new voice of having Bruce Cassidy there as the coach is helping.
Yeah, I think it's strong 4-1 too. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you get off and your record's good, but it's not like people are going, wow. And I think they are just saying wow with Vegas. Vegas seems to have come back. Eichel's playing strong. A couple of goals again last night, better than a point per game. Doing his thing, and they look strong. Their defense looks good, and their goaltending, which was, I don't want to call it suspect because I thought Thompson was pretty good at the end of last season, but nobody was comparing it with Shesterkin in New York or Vasilevsky. Unproven, yeah. And but they've looked good. Their goaltending has been good. So with all that going, like now they look like they're the contender we thought they were going to be last year that they weren't.
Yeah, Cassidy proved something to me last year. With Boston, at the times that they were sort of man down, 10 men down, whatever, he was keeping them in it. And that showed me that, this guy could really coach and kind of keep, rally the troops. So with Vegas now, he, it's a little bit easier in that regard. And I think, now that he's got this talent level, Cassidy could do a lot with him.
Anthony, Cassidy lost the room in Boston. Clearly, Bergeron wasn't going to play for him anymore. Krejci wasn't going to play for him anymore, and Krejci came back this year. But Boston, under Montgomery, they're 4-1. They beat Anaheim yesterday, and Brad Marchand is skating, so it sounds like he's going to get back a little earlier than a lot of people expected him to get.
And again, we anticipate that that the Atlantic race is going to be tight, especially in the back end, especially if you're talking about the wild card positions. Boston's trying to fortify themselves, and again, I think for both teams, when we look at Cassidy going to Vegas and Montgomery now taking over from him in Boston, these are 2 rooms that needed those voices. I think. I think that's the way you have to look at it. Boston needed the change. Cassidy was there for a long time, and all coaches, as we all know, it's cliche, but all coaches have shelf lives at a certain point. But Cassidy's been a proven winner, and Montgomery, before what happened to him in Dallas the previous season, I thought he was doing an excellent job in Dallas before he lost the job. He's always been, in my mind, an NHL level coach, and again, it appears, at least in the early going, both the Knights and the Bruins are responding to both coaches.
Yeah, Marchand looked really adorable in the Pooh Bear jersey that he was wearing. That they showed on Twitter.
That's the first time ever the word adorable has been used. Marchand. I like it.
I don't know if he was adorable as a baby. That's how unadorable Brad Marchand was. But okay, let's end with this. And you touched on it. The reverse retro jerseys come out. The last time
can I guess you hate them, Mike?
I like some of them. I absolutely hate others. The Toronto
I think it's
one,
a better, Mike. I would say as a group, this edition is better.
Yes,
than the previous edition.
Yeah, I would say that.
I think it's better.
Specifically the Toronto one. They went last time. They went with the gray jersey, which they had never worn before, which was hideous. This time they sort of went back to like the 1962 Leafs jersey, which was the cup winning team. It's 60th anniversary. It looks cool. It's not, I don't buy jerseys anymore. It's not something that I would buy, but I could see fans buying it. It's attractive. On the other hand, on the opposite end of the spectrum, Kev, the decapitated goat's head that the Buffalo Sabres put out is just nobody. I know tons of Sabres fans. Nobody likes that friggin' jersey. When they got rid of it, that and then the Garden Slug, they got rid of that and they went back to the old Cross Sabres and the Buffalo. Everybody loves that. Nobody wants this friggin' jersey. I know it's for money-making purposes, but if you're going to do that, do something that the fans actually like.
Yeah. I mean, it's a point. I mean, I talked to a team official about this, and he just kind of laughed. He goes, it's the same thing every time we do these. He said, we put them out. The initial reaction is negative. A lot of people just don't like change, and they go at it, and then they watch it. The players put them on. We put some promos out. People start to say, well, those aren't bad. I'm getting kind of used to it. And he says, and the sales are always the same. Like it doesn't really matter what they do. I think they made an effort. I agree with you. As a general thing, I liked a lot of these. I think they were a little bit careful with some, like in Pittsburgh, you got to go tradition, and they got a jersey that Mario Lemieux wore. They were pretty safe. They went safe. Other teams went bold, like the Florida Panthers went bold.
Brilliantly bold.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I did too. They went bold. I thought those Sharks, conservative. You can't lose if you go California Golden Seals.
Well, I have to say, Eck, he did this a year ago, a year ago. He put out like a mock of the Sharks jersey. I think it was when the reverse retros came out before. He did a mock. He used the gold and green colors, and he had and if you look at the Sharks emblem, it's the same font as the Seals. It's different. I think they mixed the teal in there instead of the green and gold. But Eck hit it right, exactly right. But he was a year too soon. That one, I always thought that the Golden Seals jerseys were cool. The raindrops on the Tampa Bay Lightning jersey, the rock with the oil in it for the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, it just
I didn't love that one. I never liked the Mighty Ducks, so you don't have to get me started on that. But
the most hated jersey in the history of the NHL, the Fisherman's Friend for the Islanders.
Well, here's the thing about
that. Is it truly the most hated jersey of all
time? No, but it was hated at the time.
I don't know.
It was hated at the time. What's interesting is it's almost like a defiance. Like everybody, you say this is ugly, I want it. It's like, and it's just a lot of people are buying it. It seems like for that reason.
It's the gritty principle.
It really is, because it's
hated it at the beginning. Everybody hated it initially. Other people said something, and then all of a sudden people turned on it.
It's still ugly. I was gonna say the Ranger one, the Liberty one, I owned it, right? And Mike Richter played in that jersey. So like there's a lot of people that have that already. The Cooperalls is funny because, growing up in New York, we laughed at the Cooperalls. Like a lot of people laughed at the Cooperalls. But for warm-ups, it's great. I think it'll cause a big stir.
Absolutely. I think it's brilliant. I think it was a great idea. It's a great idea. I think the matches well with the jersey that they're going to be wearing. And having it for warm-ups, I think is perfect.
Go ahead, Kev.
I think the one thing that's really important here for all of these jerseys, I thought it was fascinating to me that the NHL said that the teams are going to wear these between 2 times and 8 times. Like everyone should wear them 6, or something like that, because the more you wear them, the more fans get used to them, and then they'll want to buy them. Like I don't know who's wearing them too, but that's absurd. Why put these out for 2 games? You're just inviting
because they didn't want to be involved, Kevin. That's really what it comes down to. The team put the effort in. I just feel like maybe it takes away from whatever the current branding is, and that's why they're only doing it for 2 games.
I'll just say this, because being up in Toronto as much as I am for Leaf games and walking around before the games, if I've seen 5 people wear the gray and blue reverse retro jerseys that the Leafs had, It's a lot, and I saw them on the discount rack. They did not move. These I think will move because I think they're traditional, close to traditional jerseys. One thing, Kev, have you ever talked to any of the players like for Philadelphia or Hartford that played in the Cooperalls? Because Jeff Merrick on his radio show had an interesting observation. He talked to people and said that one of the reasons why they didn't fly in the NHL is if a player fell down on the ice, they couldn't stop. There was no resistance with the
Right.
slack leg that they had.
I remember talking to players that they simply didn't like them. I don't recall why. I don't recall why, but that makes sense actually. It's so weird about how players are about gear and stuff. Like I remember doing a story specifically when it was a big movement to try to get more players to put on visors, and Gretzky tried them in practice, and he was doing it in a practice in Minnesota. So I flew to Minnesota to talk to him after that practice, and he didn't like it. But everybody was talking. Everybody talks about fogged up. He said my issue was I didn't hear as well, and he said that's important to my game. And he said the visor sort of it vibrated, the noise kind of a little bit off the visor. And I couldn't hear the crispness that he needed to hear. And those are the kind of things that are important to players. So I could see that if that maybe is the case, that the ability to stop is a pretty important one when you're sliding along on the ice. So
I wanted to mention something that's a developing story. So Sports Business Journal did this story where so far Major League Baseball has not signed a new deal with Bally Sports, who's owned by Sinclair Media Network. And the NHL renewed its deal, and so did the NBA, but they may have only renewed it for like 1 year. So this regional sports network of Bally's could be in trouble if they don't.
It's only there. It's not Bally. It's Sinclair. Bally just owns the licensing rights to the name.
Okay. So it's Sinclair then. Yeah.
It's Sinclair.
Yeah. Okay. And if they don't get their deal in line with MLB, you wonder how the other sports are going to fall on this.
And unless I'm mistaken, Sinclair is a radio network and a network that is, let's just say, right of center, Russ. I'm
not sure that's why baseball is not re-signing with them. It could be, but I don't think that's why.
Yeah. I don't think that's it.
I don't think that's
maybe I'm wrong,
but I'm just saying regional sports networks, they could be going the way of the dodo bird, because like right now the Columbus Blue Jackets fans are sort of complaining about weird blackout games that they're not getting many games as they should be getting.
There's been whispers now for a while about MLB and the NHL and the NBA cutting a deal, the three of them working together to do their own regional broadcast.
This could be the start of it.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just say this because I was talking to a Sabre fan who is a cord cutter. He wanted to drop cable, and the problem is that how does he get the game locally? The games are broadcast on MSG. It's on so he can't get the games on ESPN Plus because the games are blacked out. And he can't get the game on the center ice package because the games are blacked out. So he is almost forced to, because there's no antenna, no broadcasting that he can pull these games in on. So the only way that he can watch Sabres games is to buy cable. So you're in a sort of a closed market. You're forced to.
Yeah. I mean, when Sinclair cut their deal with YouTube TV, because that was the way people were doing it, and then YouTube stopped carrying them. Then all of a sudden he's right. There's no other way to get it except through cable.
Yeah. All right, guys, great show. We'll be back on Monday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For the departed Anthony Mangione, for Russ Cohen, for Kevin Allen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.